Hi everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, hello, welcome to this little time lapse where I'm just going to take you through my top tips for drawing realistic graphite and charcoal portraits. So for me, I tend to use a mixture of the both. For this little foal, I've been using charcoal powder and then going over to start adding a bit more depth and then the detail over the top with graphite pencils. I will list all of the materials that I used for this below if you're interested, including like the surface and everything like that. One of my top tips when drawing anything realistic is try and forget the detail. Obviously detail is important, but one of the most important factors during anything realistic is to really make sure we're getting our values in correctly. What I mean by this is really making sure that we're getting our darks dark enough and our lights light enough. This can really give the illusion of depth. And having depth to a portrait is genuinely so important. So for me, when I'm working on a piece like this, I'm really trying to establish my values correctly. So making sure that I'm really paying attention to where my dark areas are and not focusing on the detail till right at the end. The great thing about graphite is it's super forgiving. So if you tend to make mistakes, or just in general, if we make any mistakes with this, it's really easy to remove. And I like to use different erasers to get different effects. My top two favourites when drawing with graphite are the Tombow Mono Eraser. Now this is great for getting those little precise details, and if you want to remove a very precise area, because the end of the eraser is so fine, so you can really get in there and remove all the important details. And also for the larger areas, or to create the illusion of really soft looking fur, I like to use a putty eraser because it's super moldable and you can just mold it into the shape you want and just remove little bits, which I'll demonstrate a little bit further on. In this time lapse, you'll also see me using a variety of blending tools to really help my pencils blend together to create the illusion once more of depth. So you'll see me using a soft tool, which is the oval shaped. It's almost like a sponge, and this is great for really blending out really sort of large areas. You'll also see me using a white stump. This is really great, again, for blending some sort of more precise areas. And then for lightly blending charcoal powder or my base layers a little bit, I really like to use a fluffy, like a watercolour brush, because it's really soft. And then I start to go in with some of the details, and I like to use mechanical pencil to get those really fine details in. That tends to be a bit of like a 2B graphite pencil. Then over the top I'm using 4B, 6B, 8B, and then at the end, just to really get those darks dark, because as I said, values are so important, I go in with my black polychromos pencil. When it comes to drawing fur, one of the biggest and most important things that I always suggest and I always advise whenever I teach classes like this is pay attention to the shapes that we see rather than what we think we see. And what I mean by this is sometimes it can be very easy for us to get really carried away with drawing what we consider to be fur, so really stringy little lines, when in reality the fur doesn't look like that in the reference photo. And it's really quite easy in a way to build up realistic looking soft fur with graphite, because it's so moldable and so blendable, and it can take, you can keep layering and layering. So I will always be working in the direction of the fur pretty much from my initial pencil layers. However, I like to layer more and more pencil over the top, and then I really like to try and blend it all out, just to create a much smoother base tone and base layer. And then over the top, I can really just establish the details right at the end to give the illusion of the direction of the fur and how the fur is sat. But for the most part, to really create the illusion of fur, we want to draw it almost in clumps rather than in individual hairs. And when it comes to working on the body of this foal, that is the key. And also when it comes to really creating the lighter contrast against the darker contrast, this is where using correct erasers really is invaluable. Removing any harsh lines, blending areas together. You almost want to have like really soft edges, because you'll notice a lot with animals that they never have like a fine, like an outline to them. They almost like disappear into the background, and that is another really, really useful piece of advice when drawing anything realistic. For me, drawing this piece was such therapy. I absolutely loved drawing it, and I recorded the whole process, which is a super in-depth, real-time tutorial if you fancy giving it a go yourself. It is now live over on my website, and I take you step by step through from the initial line art right to the completed portrait. If you found these tips useful, please do let me know in the comments below so where my voice is going, and don't forget to subscribe.